Good morning and welcome everybody. My name's Ed Montgomery. I'm the Dean of the Georgetown Public Policy Institute and I want to welcome you here to the 15th annual forum, issue forum that we're putting on. Today's event is a co-sponsored event between the Center for Nonprofit Leadership and the School of Foreign Studies Institute for the Study of Diplomacy. These issue forums, these Nielsen issue forums, as I said, have been put on for more than a decade each year here at Georgetown, where we try to bring together leaders in philanthropy, leaders in the nonprofit sector, academics, government officials, practitioners, to talk about the role and the evolution of philanthropy and how it can help us address some of the important challenges that we face. Whether it's domestically or internationally, philanthropy is increasingly playing an more and more important role. In my previous job before coming to Georgetown, I was on the Auto Task Force, and part of what we tried to do there as General Motors and Chrysler were being restructured is to think about what could we do for the communities which were hard hit. And in that effort, we brought together both government agencies and state and locals, but then we tried to work with people on the ground. And central to all of those efforts were community foundations, national foundations, nonprofits at the local level. Globally, we see that the big challenges that the world confronts are also being attacked both by a combination of governments, both international governments, organizations, national officials, local officials, but also philanthropy. Whether you're talking about healthcare, the eradication of malaria, whether you're talking about HIV/AIDS prevention, whether you're talking about climate change, whether you're talking about economic development, philanthropy has been playing a bigger and bigger role and having a major seat at the table. They're having a major seat at the table in part because of generous donors who are much more active and want to be involved, and not only want to give money, but increasingly want to have a say in how that money is spent. And so I don't need to tell the experts here that. They know far better than I. But Gates doesn't just simply write a check and walk away. As an example, they have opinions, and they to put it mildly. Again, and so I think the purpose of today's conversation is to talk about the role of philanthropy, to talk about how that's evolving and whether these donors can serve and how they can serve to productively move the ball forward and address the problems that society is addressing. As I mentioned, our effort is sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation, and we want to thank them. They have provided very generous support to GPPI, the Public Policy Institute, for the Nielsen Chair, also supported Kathy Kretman's Center for Nonprofit Leadership. They have been a very supportive foundation, and so we need to thank them. I want to thank Kavina Ramdas, who's this year's Nielsen Visiting Fellow, for being here, and she's really helped us put on some really effective programming this year, and our students have been really engaged by her leadership and wisdom, so I want to really thank you for that. I want to thank the leaders and moderators, but the privilege of being the hometown dean is I get to be the homer and say things that my own folks won't say, and so I got to hold up Kathy Kretman, who has really done a wonderful job. And Kathy has just built a very powerhouse center and is seen as both the place to go to get answers on what's happening in philanthropy, but also to provide training for nonprofits and small foundations who are looking to lead and manage their organizations in the new century. So, Kathy, you've really been great for us, and we're really pleased to have you. So let me turn to my introduction of the first panelist here today, and that's Stanley Katz. Stanley Katz is Professor of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University. He has been President Emeritus of the American Council of Learned Societies, the National Humanities Organization in the United States. He is the recipient, most recently, of the National Humanities Medal from President Obama. He is a fellow Phi Beta Kappa. He has a good pedigree from Harvard and for his undergraduate and PhD. He's been head of the American Organization of American Historians, author of dozens and dozens of books, and a leading scholar on questions of democracy and civil society. And we're privileged to have him here today to kick off today's presentation. Mr. Katz.
Thanks very much. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here today, and it's wonderful to see so many people in the audience, a lot of friends in the audience. It's not a terribly pleasant day outside, but it could be snow. So we're probably lucky. I would like to say thank Ed for the introduction. I didn't know this until 5 minutes ago, but Ed mentioned that I've been president of the Organization of American Historians, and so had his father. In fact, I think his father was almost immediately my predecessor in that, and his father passed away very recently, and I want to extend my condolences to Ed and the family. It's great being here. I want to say just a word, and before I introduce Kavita, just to put things in a little bit of perspective for you. Ed has already stressed the extent to which large-scale philanthropy, what I think of as mega philanthropy, has been making a difference not only in the United States, but perhaps even more so outside the United States. And of course, that's mainly what this conference is about. But think about, for a moment, very recent kinds of events along these lines. In Davos in January, Bill Gates announced that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was going to contribute $750 million to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. The same week, actually the same day, Japan as a nation announced that it would contribute something like half of that amount to the same fund. That's a stunning kind of number, and even 10 years ago, it would have been an unimaginable number in terms of philanthropy. Another marker of this would be, as of the end of 2009, the total assets of the Gates Foundation were $33,912,326,000. That's a very large number, and that doesn't count the $30 billion that Warren Buffett has pledged to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to increase, and all of which, by the way, gets paid out over 5 years. This is a huge bump in what that foundation can do. And that goes in line in this country with the explosion in the net worth and annual giving potential for the private philanthropic sector in the United States. As of the end of last year, the end of November 2011, there were 61 private and community foundations in the United States with net assets of more than $1 billion. There were 11 private foundations with assets of more than $5 billion. There were 28 with assets of more than $2 billion. Total foundation giving in this country around 2010 was more than $20 billion. So these are huge kinds of numbers. America's top 50 donors last year, 2011, gave $10.4 billion. And these numbers, by the way, have bounced back from the recession. Now we're about where we were in 2007. I could give you a lot more numbers, but the point is quite simple. There's a huge amount of individual wealth. The 1% are doing very well indeed. And a lot of their money is going into philanthropy. Well, others are going to have more to say about all of this. And the first to say will be my friend Kavita Ramdas, who is, as Ed said, this year's Waldemar Nielsen Fellow at the Institute. And I guess I should say at this point that there are only a few people in this room, I think, who are friends of Wally Nielsen. But Pablo and I, at least, were two of them. I'm sure there are others here. He was a great guy, and he was certainly one of the people, a former foundation official, who was instrumental in beginning scholarship on the foundation sector and getting people to take it seriously. It's very fitting his name should be institutionalized here. Kavita was educated first in India and then at Mount Holyoke College, and later at the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton, where I where I teach, and she's had a fabulous career in this sector since. She is currently the executive director of Ripples to Waves, a program on social entrepreneurship and development at the Spogli Institute for International Studies at Stanford University, where she is based. But before that, most people know her well, I think, because she was the president and CEO of the Global Fund for Women, something she did from '96 to 2010. She is a trustee of a number of institutions, including my own, Princeton University, but also Mount Holyoke College, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and she is the classic person who has devoted her life to doing good for the public. Kavita.
Thank you very much, Stan, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to all of my colleagues here at Georgetown, but like the Dean, I will say a special thank you to Kathy Kretman and to Paula Newberg, who I've known for many, many years, and I'm really pleased that the Dean Center for the Study of Diplomacy was able to connect with the Center on Nonprofits to welcome me, and I've had a wonderful time here, and I only wish it could be longer. The panel title for today, and much of what you heard in our opening remarks is in Stan's opening comments, has to do with philanthropy. But I think the title says this even more specifically, which is we're talking about public problems and private money. And I wanted perhaps to begin by sharing my thoughts on this topic of philanthropy in terms of how it affects, shapes, and moves policy on the issues that are of concern to us in terms of the public good. And I think that that's that whole understanding, the role of that private impetus, or the role of that private set of resources in being able to shape and affect public outcomes has really been evolving in the context of a much broader set of realities, almost through the entire 25 years that I have spent in philanthropy. I've had the privilege of working for both private foundations, like the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. No, we're not on NPR right this minute, although none of us can hear that without thinking about it. And then, as Stan mentioned, for the last 14 years prior to my stint at Stanford, working for the Global Fund for Women, which is that interesting entity called a public foundation, which is has the legal status of a public charity in that it can receive grants and charitable donations, but then also makes grants and charitable donations onwards. A kind of organization that larger foundations tend to refer to as a re-granting institution. So I've had an opportunity to look at philanthropy from sort of different perspectives. I've also had the privilege of getting to know a very wide range of both individual donors and foundations of every ilk, from small, tiny, personal family foundations to really large foundations like the ones that Stan just mentioned, particularly the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where I had the very wonderful opportunity to actually be a member of their first ever advisory panel to the Global Development Program. And I think I have struggled through that entire period with the inherent contradictions of this whole notion of private resources and the public good. I think there are increasingly difficult ways in which we try to resolve those contradictions, but I don't think those contradictions are new. And I think the importance of something like the Occupy Wall Street movement, which really is a social movement in the sense that it's not a particular NGO, it's not an organization we can necessarily make a grant to, although I notice on their website they now do have a place where they can make alliances with philanthropic actors. But I think the contradictions are important because we do live in a very strange and increasingly unequal world, a world in which over 2 billion people live at or below the bare subsistence level